Hey, hold on, man. Caitlin Clark might be the greatest player in women's basketball, dog. Hold on, man. You know how good you have to be to play in a position that you don't necessarily play in and still win MVP? Are you kidding me? What in the world? We gotta take a look at this, man. Hold on.
The TISO MVP of the tournament is none other at the FIBA Women's Basketball World Cup qualifying tournament here in Puerto Rico.
Playing out of position, 4 of 5 games. Not her natural spot, not her professional role. And she still walked away with the tournament MVP. That is not supposed to happen at the international level. That kind of performance doesn't belong in a qualifying tournament recap. It belongs in the conversation about what kind of player you are actually dealing with. And right now, after what went down in San Juan, Puerto Rico, that conversation has a new piece of evidence that nobody anywhere can argue with. The FIBA Women's Basketball World Cup qualifying tournament wrapped up with a result that is already reshaping how USA Basketball approaches roster construction heading into September. Caitlin Clark played small forward for 4 of the 5 tournament games, moved out of the point guard position that defines her professional identity, asked to guard wings, run off ball patterns, and compete in physical matchups that most playmakers never encounter at any level. She responded by leading the entire USA squad in efficiency, posting the tournament's best assist numbers across the entire field, and walking away with the tournament MVP, her second international MVP, by the way. The first came at the Under-19 Women's Basketball World Cup in 2021. Between those 2 awards, she redefined every major benchmark women's basketball had in place. And now she returns to the international stage for her senior debut, plays out of position for most of the tournament, and immediately wins it again. The people who spent the past year arguing she wasn't ready for this moment are going to need a completely new argument, because Puerto Rico just demolished the last one. If this channel has been your source for cutting through the noise and getting the real picture on what's happening with Caitlin Clark and this league, hit that like button right now. It signals to us that this depth is what you're here for, and it genuinely helps us keep delivering it. Now let's walk through exactly what happened in San Juan, because the game-by-game detail is where the real story lives, and where the numbers tell something the headline alone can't. Game 1 against Mexico on January 23rd. Caitlin at point guard, her natural position, the role she was drafted first overall to fill, the spot from which she averaged 28 points per game and rewired women's basketball viewership in her final season at Iowa. 17 points on 80% shooting, 12 assists for the double-double. All threes and high-percentage layups, the shot selection discipline that makes her efficient at a volume most scorers can't sustain. The formula at full power. The coaching staff got exactly what they needed to confirm the approach was working at the senior international level. Then they made the call. They moved her to small forward, not as a brief adjustment to solve one specific matchup. For 4 consecutive games in international competition. Game 2 against the host nation Puerto Rico. Caitlin lining up as a wing, defending perimeter players, running off-ball cuts that require a completely different physical and cognitive framework than operating as a primary ball handler. 8 points on 33% shooting, 20% from 3. The offensive numbers were rough, and anyone telling you otherwise isn't watching honestly. Operating in unfamiliar floor spacing, with defenders playing her differently than they play a first-option guard. The shooting efficiency took the hit you would predict for any player suddenly outside their professional comfort zone under international-level pressure. The critics who had their narratives pre-written reached for them immediately. But here is what those takes completely missed. 3 rebounds, 2 assists, 1 steal, 1 block. She wasn't simply standing at a new position and hoping for the best. She was executing the full defensive responsibility set of a wing player, moving laterally against perimeter scorers, fighting through physical screens, contesting at the rim in situations a point guard almost never encounters. The defense was locked in at a level nobody expected. She was solving problems in real time that were entirely outside her professional experience, and she was solving them competently, under pressure, on an international stage.
Puerto Rico, and I think this game was so sluggish. Now, the thing is, she played her position in the first game, and then all of a sudden we started putting her at the 3. This is why this is crazy, man. This is why this is crazy. Now, she was playing at the 3 in this game. She had 8 points in this one, 33%, 20 from the 3, had 3 rebounds, 2 assists, 1 steal, and 1 block. So the defense was piped up in this game. I remember going crazy about the defense in this game, but the offense was very sluggish, and she didn't shoot that well in this game, right? Now we go back. We play Italy, and I think she looked way better in this game. Let me see, Caitlin, 12 points, 80% from the field, 66 from the 3, had 5 assists, also had 5 turnovers in this one, though. But even with those 5 turnovers, she was kind of like, at the end, she threw one way out just to throw it to Paige. She wasn't caring about the turnovers.
Game 3 against Italy, still operating as the small forward, still in the role she was never recruited to fill. The offensive correction arrived decisively. 12 points, 80% from the field, 66% from 3, 5 assists. She found the gaps in Italy's defensive rotations, identified where space opened against their schemes, and converted at the rate that makes her genuinely dangerous from anywhere on the floor regardless of what the lineup card says. And then there is the number that most coverage scrolled past entirely. She had the best plus-minus on the entire USA roster across the tournament. When Clark was on the floor, USA controlled the game. When she sat, the margins tightened. That quiet, inarguable fingerprint belongs to a player whose impact operates well beyond what any single box score category captures. Pull back to the final tournament statistics, and the complete picture comes into sharp focus. Efficiency rating of 14.6, the highest mark on the entire USA squad. 11.6 points per game on 52.9% field goal shooting, numbers that hold up against any standard of high-volume efficiency, and the figure that defines what separates Caitlin Clark from every other elite player in women's basketball right now, 6.4 assists per game, the best mark in the entire tournament field. She was generating assists at a higher rate than anyone else in the competition while operating off the ball as a wing player. Think about the structural contradiction that represents the designated playmaker moved away from the position where she creates those plays, still creating them better than everyone else in the field. Compare the full tournament line to Kelsey Plum, who led the USA team in scoring. Plum is exactly what she is designed to be, a pure scorer who attacks off the dribble, creates her own shot in tight windows, and hunts her spots relentlessly. That is her function, and she filled it at a high level throughout the qualifying run. Angel Reese led in rebounds, doing the interior physical work that defines her game with the Chicago Sky. These are players operating within their designated roles. Caitlin, operating outside her designated role, still led the metrics that most directly determine who wins basketball games. And here is a detail about the MVP award that the coverage has not given enough weight. The fan voting component was open. Anyone with internet access and motivation could participate. The communities that have coordinated against Clark's recognition since her college days had the opportunity, the infrastructure, and the motivation to organize a vote effort and redirect the award to a different player. They tried. The pattern of that coordinated activity is well documented by anyone who has followed women's basketball online over the past 2 years. And she still won, because the performance operated at a level where no amount of organized voting could manufacture a credible alternative. You cannot build a case against an efficiency rating of 14.6 and a tournament-best 6.4 assists per game when the competition you are proposing as a replacement did not come close to those numbers in the same tournament. The ballot cannot override the data. The performance closed the argument before the voting total was ever announced. This is, worth stating plainly, her second international MVP. 3 years separate the first from the second. In that window, she became the all-time leading scorer in NCAA Division I history, breaking a record that had stood across both men's and women's basketball combined for decades. She led Iowa to back-to-back national championship game appearances. She was selected first overall in the 2024 WNBA draft. She won WNBA Rookie of the Year and was named to the All-WNBA First Team in her debut professional season, breaking the league's single-season assist record in the process. And then she stepped onto an international court for her senior debut, played out of position for 4 of 5 games, and won MVP again. That is not a resume. That is a case file. And what it is building toward is a question USA Basketball cannot answer without acknowledging what they chose not to do 18 months ago. Drop your take in the comments right now. Do you think USA Basketball moved Clark to small forward to actively test her versatility before building the Berlin roster, or was it a tactical response to how the qualifying field was constructed? That distinction shapes everything about how September gets built. Stay with us, because what this tournament exposed about an 18-month-old roster decision is something the mainstream coverage is still not giving full weight to. Here is what Puerto Rico does to the narrative around the 2024 Olympic roster call. Because that decision, the one to leave Caitlin Clark off the Paris team, was controversial from the moment it became official and has only grown more uncomfortable with every subsequent data point. The stated justification was procedural. She had not participated in the required national team training camps. There were conversations about established pathways, about earning your way into the senior program through a process that applies to every player regardless of professional achievement. The coaching staff at the time made a call they believed they could defend on those grounds. But here is the context that procedural argument was operating against. Clark had just finished a rookie WNBA season that reshaped how the league functions commercially. She had driven viewership numbers the league had never posted. She had sold out arenas in cities where her team wasn't even playing. She had broken the single-season assist record in her debut professional campaign. She was, by every competitive metric available, one of the most impactful guards in women's basketball. USA Basketball left her home. What happened in Paris is a matter of public record. The gold standard of international women's basketball, a program that had won every major tournament it entered across more than 2 decades, barely survived. Aja Wilson had to carry the team through multiple elimination-level games. The guard rotation was visibly inconsistent in ways that USA Olympic teams almost never are. The playmaking depth that USA teams have historically generated through their backcourt, the ability to break down defenses and manufacture points when the offense stalls, was absent in Paris in ways the competition noticed and exploited. They won gold, but not in the way generational programs win gold.
We knew this about Caitlin, right? We knew this. We were like, fam, if y'all put her on the 2024 Olympic team, she is going to do nothing but help the team win. We went over there and we struggled top to bottom with our guards. I mean, if it wasn't for Asia, we was not winning, honestly. We was not winning the Olympics, right? Caitlin, literally one of the best guards at the time, and people were mad that her fans, including myself, were saying she deserved to be on that roster, man. She has been balling, right? But they had all this other things going on in the background saying, oh, she needed to attend this, attend that. All right, cool, whatever. But we already knew if Caitlin joined the USA team, she was going to absolutely dominate. Fam, let's take a look at this. Just look at this, man. She's top in efficiency, second in points. Angel got the rebounds.
The people who argued publicly that Clark deserved to be on that roster watched the Paris guard rotation struggle and understood precisely what it meant. You do not apply standard pathway rules to a once-in-a-generation talent. You evaluate what the team needs, you evaluate what the available player offers, and you make the decision that gives you the best chance to win. The argument for Clark was never complicated. She is one of the best guards in women's basketball. She makes everyone around her better. Put her on the team. Puerto Rico just provided the controlled result that validates that argument in full. She joins the senior team for the first time. She plays out of position. She wins MVP. Exactly the contribution she would have made in Paris, compressed into 5 games instead of a full Olympic run, displayed in circumstances that were even more difficult: new teammates, unfamiliar role, international pressure at the senior level for the first time. Before we continue, if this kind of analysis, the type that connects what's happening on the court to the institutional decisions shaping where this league goes, is why you keep coming back to this channel, consider joining as a member. Your support is what makes it possible to keep digging into the stories that nobody else is covering. Now pay attention to how Clark actually played in San Juan, because this is the layer that reveals something important about how her game is developing. She was deliberately passive in moments where she could have taken over. She wasn't launching deep threes to assert herself in a new environment. She wasn't hunting her shot the way a player with something to prove would. She was getting everyone else involved first, keeping ball movement alive, operating with a restraint that looked intentional rather than uncertain. Almost like someone who understood that fitting into this system, building trust with these teammates, was the more valuable investment right now, regardless of what the personal statistics ended up saying. And she still won MVP. She led the tournament in assists while consciously choosing not to dominate as a scorer. She posted the best efficiency on the roster while giving up shots she could have taken. That is not a player trying to prove something. That is a player who has already decided she doesn't need to prove it, and who is spending her tournament investment on something more valuable: system fluency and the teammate chemistry that will matter exponentially more when the actual World Cup begins. If you're watching this breakdown and it's landing, share it with someone who's still operating on the old narrative about where Caitlin Clark fits at the international level. The conversation has moved. This is where it's moved to. Now let's look forward, because September in Berlin is where this story pays off. USA Basketball now constructs their World Cup approach with verified data they simply did not have before Puerto Rico. Caitlin Clark is not just a WNBA point guard who performs well in domestic competition. She is a legitimate two-way player at the international level, capable of contributing at an elite standard from multiple positions on the floor. That changes the tactical architecture of what this team can do. The FIBA game operates differently from the WNBA. The three-point line is positioned closer to the basket, opening different shooting windows and requiring different defensive positioning. The lane is wider, creating more driving angles and different post-up geometries that favor players with extended range. The officiating philosophy allows more physical contact, which rewards players with stronger frames and more developed defensive footwork. All of those differences should, on paper, create friction for a player of Clark's build and profile operating outside her primary role. She dominated anyway. She adapted in real time to a physical environment more demanding than her professional regular season, in a position she has never specialized in, and walked out with the best numbers in the tournament field. What happens when she returns to point guard for Berlin, her natural position, her professional function, the role where she generates the numbers that made USA Basketball want her in the first place, is where the ceiling conversation gets genuinely interesting. She'll have a full training camp behind her. She'll have the chemistry from 5 shared games in Puerto Rico with teammates who now know how she reads the floor. She'll have absorbed the coaching staff's system at a depth she could only approximate before January. The Berlin version of Caitlin Clark is the Puerto Rico version, with all of that preparation layered on top. Consider what this team becomes in September. Kelsey Plum continues scoring at the volume she managed in Puerto Rico. Angel Reese continues doing the interior rebounding work that makes USA physically dominant. And Caitlin Clark runs the offense from her actual position, distributing from the spot where she generates the most duel, producing the 6+ assists per game she averaged while playing off the ball, now at natural efficiency rather than adapted efficiency. The defending champions are building for Berlin with the player who makes everyone around her better in the exact role she was built to fill. There is a question underneath all of this that women's basketball is going to be working through for years. The consistency is almost difficult to process when you trace the full timeline. Iowa again, Indiana, Puerto Rico. The stakes escalate with every stage. The opposition gets more organized, more vocal, more determined to construct a narrative that diminishes what is happening in real time. And at every stage, in every context, on every floor, the performance delivers the same answer. What Puerto Rico confirmed is that Caitlin Clark is not a product of her optimal conditions. She is not a player who dominates when the system is built around her and fades when it isn't. She dominated at the international level, out of position, in her senior debut against opponents who had every incentive to make her look ordinary. She did not look ordinary. She looked like the best player in the tournament. What Berlin tells us is still months away. But based on what just happened in San Juan, based on what she produced while being asked to be something she was never designed to be, the version of Caitlin Clark that shows up in September with her full preparation in place is something the defending champions and every team in that bracket should already be thinking about. If you haven't subscribed to this channel yet, right now is the time. Hit that notification bell so you're first in line when the Berlin World Cup coverage begins. Because if Puerto Rico is any preview of how Caitlin Clark operates under international pressure, that tournament is going to generate the kind of stories this channel will be breaking down for months. We will see you in the next one.